refuge,
haven,
oasis,
shelter.
asylum,
safety.
somos santuario,
José Cartagena,
Jose Artiga.
Peggy Argueta,
we are
sanctuary.
Marilyn Chilco,
Walk Schultz.
Sister Maureen Dutton.
Eileen Purcell. There are as many stars in the sanctuary movement as there are stars in the sky, too many to name. And that was part of the beauty. It was a decentralized movement. All were welcome, and hundreds of thousands of people across borders and generations participated. And it continues to animate movements today. It was one of the greatest privileges of my life. The refugees themselves were the heart of the sanctuary movement. They stood with us and rendered their stories of anguish, stories that were contradicted over and over again by the Reagan administration. But they told us the truth, and our government was telling lies.
We didn't understand the politics and economics early on, but we did hear the human suffering and injustice, and it was just a simple matter of will you respond or won't you?
So we met the people of El Salvador and Guatemala. We listened and examined the moral imperatives and asked ourselves, what were the risks? What is the cost of not acting?
Helicópteros, tiroteos, masacres. On May 14, 1980, I was in front of my house when I saw 15 trucks full of soldiers. That was the day when the Santo River massacre happened, when more than 600 people were killed, including children. I come from Chalatenango in northern part of El Salvador. I was persecuted because I was involved in a Christian students organization trying to change El Salvador. They called me a communist because I was involved in social justice issues. That was the label they gave us to justify the repression. After a while, there was no other way. I had to leave because they were looking for me. I was 17 years old. My parents hired a coyote to take me across the border. We got to the border between Arizona and Mexico. We had to walk. The coyote said, 12 hours. Okay, I thought for us Salvadorians, walking 12 hours was nothing. After walking the first 12 or 13 hours in the northern Arizona desert, the first person died. To survive, we had to drink our own urine. We were a group of 26 people. In the end, 13 people died and 13 people survived. I was in the compound. When the immigration rescued us, I was in the hospital for a few days, and I woke up in a jail in Arizona.
In 1981, we began to hear more horror stories about the Salvadorans and Guatemalans who were flocking into the Bay Area and going to churches for comfort, for aid. I remember Eileen Purcell and some Salvadorans came to talk to us, sharing stories of oppression, painful, bloody suffering, the military forcing people out of their villages. We took under our wing a young couple who had recently arrived from El Salvador. Ingrid and Omar Mayorga were the names they were using. Omar was a beautiful young man who came across the border strapped to the bottom of a pickup truck. Ingrid came several months later, 7 months pregnant, huddled in the trunk of a Volkswagen Bug, breathing those exhaust fumes, worried about her baby, trying to flee and join her husband. They had both been in the university in El Salvador. Omar told us about one of the times the military came in to close down the university. He remembered lying down on the ground in terror as the tanks were shooting over the heads of students, and some of the students were killed. Ingrid remembered coming back from ballet class and watching students being shot down. And this young couple, in love, knew they needed to leave for their own safety. Bob Mackenzie and I went to San Francisco and picked up this couple and drove them across the bay to settle them into a tiny little one-room apartment in the back of somebody's house where we could hide them safely. Our congregation knew that what we were doing was probably illegal, so we were very careful, trying to protect this young couple from the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which was hell-bent on sending refugees back to El Salvador to the very danger they were trying to escape. This was before our public declaration of sanctuary. This was a private protection. We thought of it as sanctuary.
I was surprised by the response of the North American people in the faith community. They started a movement to pay the funds to get us out of jail. A lady who was crying in the hospital when I was there became one of the best supporters of our struggles.
Some refugees and I were staying in the University Lutheran Chapel. We were afraid because we could be picked up right there in the church. We were afraid of being deported and, in my case, being killed. There was already an order to kill me. So we decided to go public because now we had a chance to at least tell our side of the story, because what the media was covering was completely wrong. It was the 2-year anniversary of the assassination of Archbishop Romero, victim of the death squads, who died for his courageous stand against the oppressive government of El Salvador, a regime supported by the US government.
What did we who accompanied them risk? We risked arrest, conviction, prison, the loss of a job or license. We had to live with the potential of division of our communities. We hate conflict, but we had to wrap our arms around it, and we did.
After I was released on bond, I started working with a community-based organization, and in San Francisco, we continued the work, sharing our stories and meeting people along the way.
Around that time, Steve Knapp of St. John's drafted a new sanctuary covenant that pledged to protect, defend, and advocate for Salvadoran and Guatemalan refugees. It became the prototype to address the humanitarian needs of refugees and to educate the public and organize opposition to the wars in the region.
We launched the sanctuary on March 24th, 1982, coordinating public press conferences with 5 churches in the Bay Area and 1 in Arizona.
The sanctuary movement began fostering a new set of relationships that cut across denominations, class, race, and national borders. It drew on deeply held faith convictions, the power of community, and a long tradition reaching back to the abolitionists, the civil rights movement, and the peace movement. We were profoundly inspired by the living faith and courage of the refugees and popular movements in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. Their witness infused us with hope and with courage. The US government infiltrated sanctuary congregations and social service agencies, indicted sanctuary leaders, and sent some to jail. This crackdown paralleled the US-sponsored Salvadoran and Guatemalan government's brutal crackdown on religious leaders accompanying the poor and displaced in the region. And yet, the greater the government's efforts to thwart the sanctuary movement, the larger the movement grew, and the stronger its ties with their counterparts in Central America became. By 1986, what had started in 6 congregations had grown to hundreds of congregations, dozens of sanctuary cities, and thousands of people who visited Central America, establishing ties to communities that endure to this day. Together, we create sanctuary.
I was invited by my father, Gus Schultz, to join a delegation to Mesa Grande as part of the Going Home campaign. We were at the border working out whether the buses would get through and what will happen and who will receive them on the other side. I was sitting there on the bus with the community. I remember a little girl named Flor with her mother across the aisle. As the buses moved forward, soldiers were getting onto each bus with their weapons slung over their shoulders, and they were identifying everyone who was not from the camp and making them get off the bus. So we got worried. Right as our bus stopped, the people around me tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Don't leave us, we'll keep you safe." And they gave me a baby and a live chicken. And I leaned forward with my dark hair covering me, and the soldier walked by and left the bus. I think about what we thought we were providing for safety, what it means to accompany people, and to keep each other safe while walking together in the face of all things that we were committed to change. What that support looks like is sanctuary.
We would get up at 6 a.m. to go up the mountains. It took hours to get there uphill and down. The refugees would be there at the border, waiting, and we had those lorries or trucks. Doctors Without Borders was there, and they would put some medicine into the trucks. The people arrived, and they were just so thirsty and hungry. They hadn't eaten for days. So they got into the trucks, and there were 40 people in the truck and 4 soldiers behind, and they had guns. We made our trip from the border to Mesa Grande, which is a big refugee camp with about 12,000 going over the mountains, and there was no protection on either side, and the truck would be swerving from side to side. That was the scariest thing for me. When we arrived, it was a huge celebration. We had family members out there waiting to welcome their brothers and sisters, parents, and all was just amazing. We went right back again to the border to do it the next day, and the next day, and the next.
It's an incredible feeling to realize we can be sanctuary. We can provide sanctuary to others who need it.
Back in the Bay Area, the congregations were helping refugees with shelter, services, jobs, food, attorneys, and raising funds to bond refugees out of detention. I started as a volunteer and became the sanctuary's first employee in 1982. We started a visitors program where people from the Bay Area would visit refugee camps in Honduras. The Salvadorian army, advised by Americans, would cross the borders and harass people in the camps. The stories were horrific, criminals. The military would throw people and pigs, torture them, deprive them of food. But there was nothing in the media in the US about these atrocities. Our main goal was to be a continuous presence in the camps, to listen to the refugee stories so we could share them with people back in the US, and end military aid to El Salvador and Guatemala. It was easy to feel discouraged. The refugees were called illegal aliens. People here in the US were ignorant. The newspapers were not allowed to print the truth. The US government kept denying they had advisors down there and voted to continue to aid military governments that were killing people. We started going to the courts to be a present. People were using homes as bonds for bail. We had a deep spiritual faith and belief. Of course, we also have anger, but the energy was different. It was the energy of togetherness. We had an inner drive to see the world as a different place. We had each other, our faith, optimism, our connection with refugees. That was the energy. They would tell their needs and we responded with resources and connection. We set up ways for people to help. That's what faith is about. Loving our neighbors, having a personal connection, and knowing that we can make a difference.
Who knew that the city of Berkeley could be convinced to support sanctuary?
Who knew that people would risk arrest and venturing into the desert helping people cross the border?
Who knew that the East Bay would soon have 33 congregations committing money and thousands of hours of volunteer time, organizing outreach to thousands of congregations across the U.S.?
Who knew that we would become a hub for passing on urgent actions, generating thousands of telexes on behalf of political prisoners or religious workers in Central America? That we would organize visits to Central America to stand beside threatened communities, set up speakers bureaus to tell the story of sanctuary alongside refugees, or help refugees set up apartments, find sources of free food, and plug into social services?
Who knew that the office would hire Sister Marine to coordinate our legal services program? And that 160 volunteer lawyers will line up to join what is now called East Bay Sanctuary Covenant.
Who knew that so many people outside of religious communities would lay claim to this thing called sanctuary, that it would become a household word?
Our whole lives revolved around the sanctuary movement. It was a chance to be part of something larger than ourselves.
So, how does all of this relate to the current moment, as we witness asylum seekers from around the world being turned away at our border, unaccompanied minors making the dangerous journey across the desert, families being separated? How can we continue to practice the values of sanctuary? How can we follow in the footsteps of Archbishop Romero and honor the countless others from the early sanctuary movement?
Following Romero is not easy because he asked us first to do something, but he does not tell you what. When you learn about an issue and see injustice, you cannot keep your arms crossed. You must do something. And he asks us to do more, to keep doing more until it feels uncomfortable. What does it mean to feel uncomfortable? When you advocate against injustice, the people in power do not like it, and they will persecute you. Sometimes they just might want to discredit you, fire you, put you in jail. And if you keep going, they might even kill you. Still, I invite you to follow Romero. Become a sanctuary. Do something.
This is a moment for life. The struggle and the suffering of our people continue. How can we continue seeking? How can we continue to love each other? How can we continue staying close with people?
One of the greatest gifts of Sanctuary for me in the community was that you helped accompany our families in Mesa Grande as they were going home. Remember, home is a very important place, no matter if there is a war.
We don't have the Mesa Grande refugee camp anymore, but we have connections with those who are suffering in Honduras and other parts of the world. We know we are needed to accompany the refugees of today in the same way we accompany the Mesa Grande refugees. We need to accompany people and movements that are fighting for land, information, and water.
We, as refugees, support the right to live, the right to migrate, but also the right to remain. We have the right to stay in our countries.
The chances to stay in our homes.
It only takes one person and another and another and another to start a movement. And I look at EBSC now celebrating its 40th year, and I know that's what happened, and we see it now. We are no longer acting as individuals, we are a movement. And I think what we found here tonight through the sharing of our stories is that very invitation we accepted in the beginning to become faithful witnesses in the world. And we have received so much more than we could have ever hoped to give.
Refuge.
Haven.
Oasis.
Shelter.
Asylum.
Safety.
Somos santuario.
Hello, my name is Bree, and I joined the Sanctuary movement in 2016 when, for me, immigration really seemed to blow up as a topic of debate. And all I could feel was that for me, it was not a debate and never was. It was my reality, my family's reality, and those who came before me, and those who still to this day struggle with displacement and violence at the hands of U.S. government and other powers beyond us. So I was very honored to read Marilyn's part because I think it really speaks to the urgency of this issue, seeing how history truly repeats itself, and it's a question of, are we going to act or not in this very moment? Are we going to allow history to replicate itself, or are we going to sacrifice our personal comforts and freedoms so that we can really create, foster global solidarity?
My name is Luz Hernandez, and I read the part of Peggy Arqueda. I'm part of the Sanctuary movement because my father and I immigrated to this country from Honduras when I was 14 years old. I fled poverty and violence and physical abuse, and I wouldn't be here today without the support of organizations like EBSC Sanctuary. And because of that, I have committed my life to help others.
Hi, my name is Crescencia Ramirez, and I'm here today because I migrated in 2003, and I came here in the United States, and I was lost. I was seeking for help, and nobody could help me at all. But thanks to Sanctuary and other organizations, lawyers, attorneys, they helped me out, and I was able to create our radio station. It's called Radio Balam. And partner with Sanctuary, and so now we are giving information to the indigenous Hmong community. We don't want them to get lost like I did a few years ago. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matt. I read the parts of Sister Maureen and Jose Artiga. Like Bree, the Sanctuary movement was never really something that I could join as much as it was something I was born into. coming from immigrants and refugees and being raised by those that experience those things, it is really, really hard not to deny the, importance of history and in storytelling and the oral manners in which we share stories. That has always been a part of listening to the sanctuary movement, and I think it is especially important now more than ever to not only listen, but to hear, to empathize, and to love.
Hello, my name is Alex Cristales, and I read the part of Lux Schultz. I got involved in the sanctuary movement in the summer of 2016 while studying to become a human rights lawyer. I was drawn to the sanctuary's commitment to the immigrant community in the US. I was fortunate enough to be raised by a strong and independent Colombian mother who encouraged me to achieve whatever I set my mind to. She overcame cultural and financial barriers in order to give me the opportunity to be doing what I love. Sanctuary embodies the same values that drove me to become an advocate for immigrants' rights, and it's taught me more than I could have ever imagined. Listening to the stories of many of the in the refugee community, having the privilege to be their advocate, their confidant, and seeing just how resilient and incredible they have been is not only inspiring for me personally, but it serves as a valuable reminder of just how significant and life-changing the sanctuary movement has been in so many people's lives. Many of you know that Gus Schultz, Locke's father, is considered the father of the sanctuary. It's my deep pleasure to honor Locke and Gus's wife Flora, who are with us tonight.
Part of Eileen Purcell today. I'm part of the sanctuary movement because I believe that migration is beautiful and migration is human. It always has been and always will be. My parents immigrated to the US in the 1970s, and they had a chance to build a life in stability for themselves and for myself and my sister. And I believe every single family should be allowed to have that same right themselves to build a life for their family in peace in this country. And I believe it's so important to center and to amplify and celebrate the stories of our community members. Eileen Purcell and Jose Ortega, unfortunately, were not able to attend and be with us here tonight in person, but we're just so honored to share their words with you and to share the words of so many other folks in the early sanctuary movement. So on behalf of the Amplifying Sanctuary Voices team, thank you so much for listening and honoring their words with us today.